I had such a perfect read on Bellator 222, and we lost the unit. I am so pissed off right now. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. Unfortunately, I have to sit here and recap the fiasco that was Bellator 222 and try and explain to everybody exactly how I messed up. So, first and foremost, it's a Bellator card, the lines weren't out in time, and we missed a couple, and that there's nothing I can do about, but I'm still upset about it. One thing that I did is I messed up on Ricky Bandejas. I completely underestimated Patrick Mix. Completely underestimated the guy. Now, looking at his record, looking at some of the video that I saw, I don't think I could have predicted just how good he actually was. What he did to Ricky Bandejas in that fight was phenomenal. Nothing short of phenomenal. The wins he has over legitimate UFC level guys, I'm not impressed with those UFC level guys. But that should have been a pass. Rather than betting on Bandejas, I should have just passed on that bet. So that was my mistake, taking the Ricky Bandejas pick. I know some other people that were on Bandejas, so I wasn't alone. I know a lot of people that were on Patrick Mix, propped everybody out there on that. But it was a fight that had enough questions surrounding it that I just should have passed. Now, we get to Chael Sonnen. I'm torn on this one. I do not like betting on fighters who are retiring. If you know someone is retiring, they are mentally checked out. They usually don't have that good of a training camp, and they're just not going to do that good in their last fight. It happens all the time that people lose their retirement fights because they just don't have that fire anymore, and that's why they're hanging it up. Chael Sonnen at plus 260 to plus 300. I still probably take that stab on it, and he should be smarter than what he did. He got caught by the same exact knee back to back, and usually Chael would make adjustments and not get caught by the exact same knee. So I don't know that one was necessarily a bad bet. We knew Chael was a long shot. I'm fine taking a stab at that dog price. Machida did not look overly impressive once again in that fight. And old Machida, that first shot would have sent Chael's heads off into the stands. So we know he's dipped down just a little bit. We were correct about Machida having faded some. Unfortunately, Chael was just ready to have retired, and that kind of kills our spot there. So don't feel bad about that bet. We lost a huge underdog play. It happens. It's going to happen more often than it doesn't. Now, Juan Archuleta and Rory McDonald, I could not have predicted that more perfectly. Those two fights went exactly the way that I said that they were going to go, and we nailed that parlay. And this is where I really am starting to consider doing like 2 and potentially 3 unit plays on the show, just because I know more often than not, I always preach bankroll management. We do 1 unit at a time to protect ourselves so we don't dig a hole for ourselves, things like that. And I do, for the most part, subscribe to that way of thinking. But this Bellator card should have been a winning night for us. It should have been a winning night for us. And we could have gone bigger on that parlay. I was so confident in that parlay. I had such a perfect read on that parlay that we should have risked a second unit on it to make sure that we had a winning night when it cashed. And that really would have solved all of the problems. So if we pass on our one loser with Bandejas, which I easily could have done, then we have a winning night. If we double up on the parlay like we easily could have done, then we have a winning night. If the damn lines were out just a little bit earlier, we would have faded Aaron Pico because Adam Borix came through as a plus 200 underdog, and wow, I really should have been more on top of looking for that line to come out and tweeted it out or something to you all, because I called that. I was all over Borix. I hit Borix personally, but I didn't have the opportunity to let you all know. Also, because this fight was happening on a Friday night as opposed to happening on a Saturday like it usually does, I didn't have nearly as much time to get everything out there like I wanted to. Unfortunately, this is not my day job. I am not a professional sports bettor. I'm just here trying to provide some entertainment and put some money in people's pockets. This is my nighttime and weekend job. So I do apologize for that one, but that's where, one more time, we would have played that 200 underdog. I did play that 200 underdog, and I'm really sad that I couldn't get that line in time for the podcast to get it out for everybody. So the final piece of this puzzle was I freaking called Horiguchi as well. Now, I said that the line for Darian Caldwell was just fishy, and I felt like the cage was going to be involved for the wrestling, and I thought that was going to make a bigger difference. Horiguchi's just the better of the two fighters. I said all the value was on Horiguchi, but honestly, I got spooked. You never know what's going on over there in Japan. They throw fights, you don't know who's in control over there. So coming over here with the cage, I didn't know what exactly to expect, especially when all that money kept coming in on Caldwell and that line climbed up to Horiguchi at plus 150. Once again, personally, I took a little poke at it because that's, like I said in the podcast, that's where the value was, and that line was starting to get out of hand. I wish I had trusted my gut, and I wish I had given that play on the podcast. We could have easily had a very, very positive night. I did have a positive night personally, but I hate showing a losing night and having a losing record, even though it was just a small loss, and that's why we do the bankroll management that we do. That's why we take a cautious approach. It wasn't a bad loss. It was a very small loss, but I'm tired of the small losses. I know right now we're on kind of a roller coaster, small win, small loss, small win, small loss, and that's going to happen a lot in MMA. I have to go back to my speech that I gave, episode 1, episode 2, something along those lines. We have to manage our bankroll appropriately. You take small pokes at all of these bets because at any point in time you can hit that landslide where it just all goes wrong, and you want to make sure you can survive that. The variance in MMA is something else. You cannot handicap just how much variance there is in MMA because you are trapping human beings in a cage, and they will surprise you. They will perform above and below expectations based on lots of factors. So we have to be super careful, and that's why we do it the way that we do it. But this fight rubs me the wrong way because we could have had like a plus 3 unit night, a plus 4 unit type of night because I just nailed it. Like, start to finish, I drilled this card, and I have to apologize for all of you. It's really bothering me. So I'm going to bury that, put it behind us. I'm very hard on myself as far as the record for the podcast goes. I'm not going to give myself any breaks or anything like that. So minus 1.1 units on Bellator 222, and we're going to try and dust that off. We're going to stop talking about it. We're going to leave it behind us, because we've got some MMA action coming up this week, and unfortunately it is not an easy card to be dealing with. UFC Greenville is a difficult card with some wide lines where it's going to be really hard to spot some value. The nice thing is, though, that's not the only thing happening this weekend. Bellator is coming back to us with a UFC 223 card, which actually looks promising. And on top of that, we have the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, headlined by Paulie Malignaggi and Artem Lobov. So there is all kinds of stuff to get into. Positivity. Let's wipe the slate. We're still positive. The 2019 record is still looking good even after having another rough night. You remember, we talked about it. We're only trying to win 55% of our bets. If we long-term win 55%, we are profitable sports bettors. And that's what we're doing right now. The 2019 record is 66-59 for plus 27.19 units. We still have a very large profit margin as far as the show is concerned. So shake it off. Let's keep rolling. Let's go. UFC Greenville kicks off with Andre Ewell, Mr. Highlight, which is a terrible name for this guy, facing off against Anderson Dos Santos. Andre Ewell is 14-5-0. Anderson Dos Santos is 27-0. Andre is a 31-year-old guy facing off against a 33-year-old guy from Brazil. So Andre Ewell is exactly that disappointing fighter that I was talking about that led me to underestimate Patrick Mix. So, lesson time. Here's a good little thing for us to get into. One of the things that I use in my handicapping is strength of schedule. Now, sometimes that can be hard to really differentiate or determine exactly where a fighter is in their career. This is a perfect example. This kid, Patrick Mix, comes in and he submits Andre Ewell. I don't think a whole lot of Andre Ewell. So in my head, I've got Andre Ewell ticked down just a notch. So the fact that this kid was able to catch him in a submission, I didn't credit him with maybe as much credit as I should have given him. Now, I still could not have determined exactly how good he was, but in hindsight, I should have given him more credit for that submission because apparently he's legit. So just something to keep in mind. Even when you're looking at something as simple as strength of schedule, where you're like, oh, this guy won against this good fighter, this good fighter, this good fighter. I know we use that a lot, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. And that's where I should have been more careful on that pick, because that didn't tell us the whole story. So Andre Ewell, I am not overly impressed with. Now, taking a look at his record, I kind of have to bite my tongue there a little bit, because you go back as far as 2017, he has a 4-fight win streak, he gets subbed by Patrick Mix. Now we know how good Patrick Mix is, right? He goes on a 5-fight win streak, including his UFC debut by split decision over Renan Barão. That sounds plenty impressive as far as his win streak goes, but he won a split decision over Renan Barão, and Renan Barão is done, ladies and gentlemen. He is cooked. He is beyond shot. And he's currently riding a 4-fight losing streak, and he's taking a step down in competition every single time he fights, and he loses again and again and again. So even though Andre Ewell beat the name Renan Barão, he beat the shell of Renan Barão. He beat the spirit, what is left of the fighter who once called himself Renan Barão. So Andre Ewell then drops a submission to Nathaniel Wood. So what we're seeing a lot of by Andre Ewell is he gives up these submission losses. When things get dirty, when he gets tired, he is prone to giving up the submission. He gave up a 3rd round submission against Juan Beltran back in 2016, who, again, that's actually not a bad name. He gave up a submission to Patrick Mix, who we know is a badass. That happened in round 1 in 2017. But then Nathaniel Wood has a 3-round battle with him. He slows down, and he gives up the choke. So he's got 5 losses on his record. 3 of them are by submission. Now we flip over to the other side of Anderson Dos Santos. He's got 20 wins and 7 losses, with 11 of those coming by submission. Now, he's a UFC newcomer himself, but he's fought a decent level of competition outside of the UFC. I am actually kind of excited about Dos Santos in this spot, but I'm going to utilize a little bit of self-control. This is one of those spots where it's just too thin, and I'm trying to be more careful with my bets. I've been rolling the dice on a lot of 50-50s. A perfect example of that is you go a couple fights back, we took JoJo Calderwood, which I really liked that bet. I'm happy with that bet. I thought she was going to win it, but the line was 50-50, and she was maybe 55-45, 60-40, something like that. It was very, very close. So maybe we should not have been so excited to take that line. Same thing with Karolina Kovacevic. We could have easily passed there. So I'm trying to be a little bit more controlled here, because some of these lower lines where the variance really tends to swing, if it doesn't go our way, we're giving away units there. So I'm going to have a lean to Anderson Dos Santos. I might even bet Anderson Dos Santos myself, but I don't think I want to give him out as a confident pick. He opened up as a plus 125 dog. If you caught him at dog money, I like it. If you can get Anderson Dos Santos at dog money, I like it, because I believe this is a coin flip fight, or maybe he should be a slight favorite, so there is value in that spot. Right now, the line sits almost exactly where I think it should be. You can get him at minus 115, minus 125, somewhere in that ballpark, and I do think Anderson Dos Santos wins, especially with the threat of that round 3 submission. We've seen Andre Ewell give it up, and Anderson Dos Santos has a submission game. Looking for a prop via submission may not be a bad way to go, but I actually think he might just be able to grind out a decision as well. So I don't know if I want to lock us into a prop in that kind of a situation. You can get Dos Santos by submission at plus 310. But this is only his second UFC fight, and he's facing a guy in Andre Ewell who does have a decent level of competition, a decent level of experience. He's got 2 full UFC fights under his belt. Granted, like we talked about, he gave up a submission and he barely squeaked out a decision win over Renan Barão. So it's not impressive UFC competition, but it's still UFC competition no less. So this one, I'm itching. The gambler in me wants that 310. Dos Santos by submission at plus 310 sounds really juicy. Oh, we have seen Andre do exactly this situation, and Dos Santos does have an offensive grappling game. Now, granted, he has only put that to use on the regional scene. He hasn't been submitting, notable opponents, things like that. So I'm going to hold to my guns. I'm going to pass. If Dos Santos wins by like second or third round submission, though, you heard it here. If Dos Santos wins by second or third round submission, you heard it here, okay? I'm just leave it at that. Next up, we move up in weight. We're going to see Darren Wynn versus Eric Spicely at 185. And I feel so bad for poor Darren Wynn in this situation. This is his third fighter. This will be the third man he has been matched up against for this fight. They keep changing on him. He was supposed to face Brazilian dude, what's his name? He was supposed to fight Bruno Silva. And I was all over winning that fight. I know a lot of people who were betting Bruno Silva, and I loved it. I was going to tell you all to sit tight when that line crashed, because all that dog money coming in on Bruno Silva, and then we were going to hit Darren Wynn hard, because Bruno gives up the takedown. Darren Wynn is a hardcore, big-time champion level college wrestler who also did very well at the Olympic trials. He is miniature Daniel Cormier, and I mean that in every sense of the word. He trains over at American Kickboxing Academy. He is Daniel Cormier's protege, and he has a body like Daniel Cormier. He's short, he's round, he carries a little bit of extra weight on him, and we have seen what that has done for Daniel Cormier. If there is one man in MMA who I would point to and go, you need to learn from him, it would be Daniel freaking Cormier. This kid looks and moves and thinks as a fighter exactly like Daniel Cormier does. Not only that, he's got the same wrestling pedigree background. DC is going to teach this kid how to be a champion with the skill set and the physical attributes that he has. He's 5-0 with 4 KO TKOs and only 1 decision. He's fought decent competition. That 1 decision came against Filthy Tom Lawler in 2018. It was his first real big step up to kind of the pro level, and he handled Tom. I mean, that was a hell of a fight that he put on, and he crushed his other opposition in round 1 by KO. It wasn't like he was going to his grappling. He flatlined all of those dudes. So I am super high on Darren Wynn, and now they've matched him up against Eric Spicely. Now, Eric Spicely is 12-4, and he's been a bit of a UFC vet for some time. He's been fighting in the UFC since 2016. He's had mixed success. He's got a 4-4 UFC record. He's got a crazy first round submission over Thiago Santos that we have to draw a line through, because no way does that happen again. I really think Thiago came in underestimating. I said it right the first time. What is wrong with me today? Thiago Santos comes in underestimating Eric Spicely and gets caught in a first round triangle choke in 2017. And that hasn't happened again. You know what I mean? We know that hasn't happened again. Meanwhile, Eric Spicely, who we all now think is just the shit because he submitted Thiago, goes on to lose to ACJ, which not a bad loss, but grappler versus grappler. Antonio Carlos Jr. got it done. He fought Gerald Meerschaert, who is not really a great fighter, and he lost via a kick to the body. Then he fought Darren Stewart, the dentist. We know what kind of power Darren Stewart brings to the table. He won by KO in round 2. So then he takes a step back. In fact, he gets cut from the UFC after going on that 3-fight skid. So we know he shouldn't have submitted Thiago. That was a fluke. He wins against Alessio Di Chirico. He loses to Sam Alvey, ACJ, Gerald Meerschaert, Darren the dentist. He fought a decent level of competition in the UFC, but he obviously can't hang. The UFC is bringing him back on this short notice replacement to face Darren Wynn, and I know a lot of people who are really stunned by this line. They think that Eric Spicely is getting... They feel like he's being disrespected here somehow. We know exactly what we're getting with Eric Spicely. He's got a decent ground game, but he is terrible on the feet. He's not a good striker. Darren Wynn is going to be exactly like Daniel Cormier. He's going to be able to wade through the punches. He's going to keep his arms up high. He's going to take a lot of, blocks to the shoulders, blocks to the forearms. He'll protect his head. And then he explodes in there with right hands, overhands to the chin. real power hooks to the body. He'll be able to get some massive double leg takedowns, just ragdoll guys. That's what he does. And if he gets on top of Eric Spicely, don't kid yourself. Spicely's not going to throw up a triangle on Darren Wynn. First off, Darren Wynn doesn't have a neck. Trust me. Trust me. As a guy who actually has Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grappling experience, it is the worst thing in the world to try and throw a triangle on a guy like Darren Wynn. It's hard enough to get a rear naked choke on a guy like Darren Wynn. You cannot get your legs around the shoulders and the neck of a guy built like that and then squeeze hard enough to finish them, because they just don't have a neck for you to choke. I think he's the perfect machine to beat a guy like Eric Spicely. This is a nice little, maybe not even a step up in competition. Eric Spicely is probably right around the level of a Tom Lawler, maybe a little bit higher because he's a little more dangerous. He's got a little more finishing ability. But this is a perfect little notch up in competition for a guy like Darren Wynn who wants to get his feet wet in the UFC. And Spicely is taking this last minute replacement fight. We don't know if he's coming off the couch. He's just trying to cash his ticket to get back into the big show. So we don't know what kind of shape Eric Spicely's coming in. We don't know if he's hungry. We don't know if he's injured. We don't know if he had another fight that he was training for. Neither of these guys have any prep for one another, and when you look style versus style, Wynn has the perfect style to face a guy like Eric Spicely. A strong wrestler who's going to be very hard to submit, who doesn't have to deal with the threat of a very talented striker. Eric Spicely might have the height and the reach advantage and he can stay on the outside. Darren Wynn will be able to close the distance, and Spicely is not some crazy striker that we need to worry about Darren Wynn getting clipped hard on. He's also not going to leave his chin dangling out there going in for a stupid takedown or anything like that. I am so high on Darren Wynn, if you couldn't tell. Now, the problem is, because this has been moved around so much, the line it's not out everywhere. So over at 5 dimes, Darren Wynn's minus 280. And I think that's probably about accurate. I think he wins this thing, and I think he wins it handily. Now, we can actually look at the Darren Wynn inside the distance prop, and that's not a bad option either. Because at minus 110, I do think that Spicely has shown a tendency to get knocked out. I mean, Darren Stewart knocked him out. Gerald Meerschaert knocked him out. Darren Wynn is going to have that, steamroll in overhand right kind of power. I think he gets it done inside the distance. So the problem with that is that when you take a step up in competition, you never know just how confident that you should be, and he may play it safe because it's his first MMA fight. There's going to be that adrenaline dump. He's going to have a step up in competition. He might want to ride it out and just get the win. So I do not feel comfortable taking that inside the distance prop in this particular spot. I don't think it's a bad option. If you want to take him inside the distance, I don't think that's a bad option at all. I think he probably wins round 1 or 2 KO, honestly, ground and pounder with one of those big overhand rights. But I also think he's a perfect parlay piece. I think a little bit of money is probably going to come in on Spicely. It might even give us a little bit of a better line later on, but I am intending to parlay Darren Wynn. Put a pin in that. Honestly, that line on Darren Wynn is relatively indicative of how this entire card is going to go. There are massive favorites all over this card, and for the majority of them, I agree with them, but man, they're so long. This is where I usually like to look at the dogs, and we've talked about this before. I love taking live dogs, but I don't know how many live dogs there are on this card. I agree with most of the favorites being the favorites, so we're going to be looking at parlaying pieces together. So keep that in mind as we move forward at this point. I will be breaking the lines down, and I will have a couple of leans as far as some live dogs, but it's going to be a sketchy card. It's going to be one that we're really going to be on the edge of our seats for, because even if we do parlay these things together to bring the prices down appropriately, some of these folks may shit the bed. Some of these folks may just lay an absolute egg and blow a parlay or two for us, so we're going to be very careful this week. The next fight features a women flyweight fight. Ariana Lipski is facing Molly the Can McCann. Molly Meatball McCann. Ariana Lipski is one of these young, up-and-coming, gorgeous women that the UFC is really looking to promote. She's 11-4-0 facing Molly McCann, who is 8-2-0. And this is one where, just like I was talking about, I feel like Ariana Lipski is the rightful favorite in this spot. She opened up at minus 235. 55% of the money is coming on her, and she's been bet up as far as minus 280. That's way too much to lay on this. She's a relatively young fighter, and she's just getting her feet wet. And even though Molly McCann, in my opinion, is not that great of a fighter, I don't think she should be this big of a dog, especially to a young, untested fighter like Ariane Lipski. Lipski just lost a 3-round decision to my girl JoJo Calderwood in her last fight out. So I do think that, I mean, yeah, I'm going to go with my girl JoJo there. She should have won. I think I had a bet on that one, actually. But she's 11-4. You know, those losses came early on in her career. She hasn't lost very much recently. But you go on the flip side of this, and Molly McCann, as much as you want to say that she's maybe not that great of a fighter, she gets outpaced a lot, she has a decent record. She's 8-2, and she's very likely improving. I mean, we would expect Lipski to be improving at a higher rate given the age that she's at and the camp that she's in and things like that, but all things considered, this is a complete pass. I'm staying clear away from this fight. I think Lipski wins. If Lipski wins, though, I think it's going to be close because even though Molly isn't my favorite fighter in the world, she's not just going to lay down here. So this is probably going to the judges' scorecards, and it wouldn't surprise me if Molly made it close. So complete pass, but I think Lipski wins. And you know, real quick though, I know I just said that Molly, I called her the Can. That's kind of a nickname rolling around there for her. And I want to be very, very clear. This show is for the purpose of entertainment. I'm trying to have a fun podcast, so I may make fun of a couple people. I may make some jokes about some fighters. I just want you all to know that I deeply respect every single fighter that steps in that cage. Even the bad ones, like CM Punk. He had the balls to get in there with a professional killer. And that's more than a lot of us are ever going to be able to say in our lives. Just having the testicular fortitude to put that kind of a training camp in and step in there in the first place, you have earned my respect. So I may not be a fan of everybody. I may say some harsh things because we are breaking down these fights from a betting perspective. These are not things that I would say to the fighters' faces. These are not things that I would say if you asked me, you know, as a friend or as a family member. Just, you know, please keep that in mind. This is for betting. I have to be blunt, and I do also have to be entertaining for the sake of the podcast. So I'm making some connections with fighters. I know some of them may listen to these types of things in the future, and I just want them to know I'm not that guy. You know, I'm trying to have a fun show here. So please nobody think that I'm disrespecting these fighters because they all have my utmost respect. That being said, we're going to head straight back up to heavyweight where Alan Crowder, 10-3-0, takes on Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who is 7-0 undefeated. And this is a perfect example. Alan Crowder is a fun dude. I just don't think he's that great of a fighter. He's got 3 KO losses. He got flatlined by Curtis Blades. He got flatlined in 2015 by some guy named Ryan Porkfry. There's a K between the F and the Y. I have no idea how to pronounce that. And then he got blasted by Justin Big Titty Willis. Justin Big Pretty Willis, who was renamed by my boy Tai Tuivasa to Big Titty. So, gotta love that one. Well, then Alan Crowder has a win over Greg Hardy. Yes, that Greg Hardy, but it's not a win over Greg Hardy. It's a disqualification win over Greg Hardy. He got hit with an illegal knee in round 2 and decided to roll around and play it up a little bit, and they gave it to him. Greg Hardy was disqualified. Everybody was excited. We had a bet on Alan Crowder at that point in time because I told you all I will not bet on Greg Hardy. I will fade him until he beats somebody UFC caliber. We cashed a nice big underdog price on Alan Crowder when that happened because Greg Hardy finally was taking his step up and making his improvements, but because of that DQ, Alan Crowder locked up a nice fancy win for us there. So that was fun. That was really fun to watch, actually. So got to get back into this. I'm recalling just how fun it was to know that our bet was basically out the window. Greg Hardy was going to come back and win this thing, but then he throws a freaking illegal knee and cashed that ticket for us. That was a good one. So Alan Crowder, he gets another shot in the UFC, man. So he wins on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, TKO in the 3rd round. It was a really low-level, scrambly, not a very impressive kind of fight. He does not have a high level of competition on his resume, but he does KO a lot of guys. He's wild, you know what I mean? He just throws stuff out there, and he doesn't have a whole lot of power, but he out-volumes these other big heavyweights that are not a very high caliber of heavyweight. So he ends up getting it done. Now he steps up against a guy like Justin Willis and gets put down fast. And Justin Willis just got dropped out of the UFC himself after losing to Curtis Blades, which I find that a little bit odd. I mean, I know that fight against Curtis Blades wasn't the best one, but it was his first loss. So I'm really shocked the UFC cut him after one bad loss. Really kind of odd. Anyway, back on track here. I keep getting distracted this fight. Sorry about that. So Alan Crowder loses to Greg Hardy. Now, if you look at the concussive damage this guy has taken, he's got 4 bad KO losses. And I know the Greg Hardy one says it's a win, but that knee was not a soft knee. I do think he played it up a little bit. I do think he got out of there with a win, but he still got hurt. Greg Hardy is no joke. The dude's got crazy power. So he landed a flush knee on this dude, and that's going to do something. He is taking a lot of damage for this stage of his career. I've seen a lot of stuff on Instagram with him doing a lot of strength training and things like that. I think that he's going to attempt to take Rozenstruik down. Rozenstruik is a incredible striker. Now, where Alan Crowder is wild and crazy and doesn't have the most power, Rozenstruik is wild and crazy but technical and has cow-killing power. Like this, you could stand this guy in front of a moose and he would knock it out. I mean, Rozenstruik is no joke on the feet. The problem is he doesn't have a ground game. So if Crowder is working on his strength and conditioning program and he's coming in here with the mindset to take Rozenstruik down, I think he can. And if Rozenstruik hasn't been working on his get-up game, we could be in for a night. But Rozenstruik more than likely is going to be big enough and strong enough to hold Crowder off or hopefully be able to get up from bottom. If he does, I see Rozenstruik KOing Crowder. We've seen that that's easy. We've seen that it's possible. Rozenstruik has proven the kind of knockout power that he's got, with 6 of his 7 wins coming by KO. I think he very clearly gets this thing done by KO. Now, Rozenstruik is sitting at a nice solid minus 205 over on Pinnacle, minus 220 over on 5 Dimes. So he's right around that minus 200 slot there. And I think that's about accurate. I think that's where he should be, because Crowder, maybe he comes in here and makes some improvements, but I don't know that he's going to be improved enough grappling speaking to hold down Rozenstruik. And I know he cannot compete with Rozenstruik on the feet. We've already seen the 2 guys he's been in the UFC against, Justin Willis and Greg Hardy, he has not been able to contend with on the feet. Rozenstruik is a much better striker than both of them. So I think what we do is we play the more than likely scenario. We're just going to take Rozenstruik inside the distance. Over at 5 Dimes right now, you can get Rozenstruik inside the distance at minus 142. Let's face it, neither of these guys go to decision. Crowder's gone to decision once. Rozenstruik has gone to decision once. So I don't think when you throw these 2 types of fighters in the mix together that they are going to both go to decision. This happens one of 2 ways. Crowder is going to come out and try and strike with Rozenstruik, which is a really bad idea, and Rozenstruik puts him down immediately. Or Crowder's going to come out and try and grapple Rozenstruik. Maybe it works for their first round, but they come out standing in round 2 and Rozenstruik puts him down at that point. I don't see Rozenstruik winning a 3-round decision if it were to get there. So if we're going to parlay him, we're not really giving ourselves any value as far as getting Rozenstruik by decision, because I just don't see that happening. So rather than risking a parlay busting on him having a bad night against Crowder, let's just take him inside the distance, because that's really the only way that he wins this fight. We're taking Rozenstruik inside the distance at minus 142. Lock it up. Let's go. Now, that being said, if you want to parlay Rozenstruik, I don't think it's a bad idea. So if you want to use him in a parlay, that's okay too. Moving right along, we head to the lightweight division, the UFC's preliminary division. Matt Wiman is coming out of retirement, sort of, to face Luis Pena. Matt is 16-7-0, and we have not seen him in about 5 years. Matt Handsome Wiman was a relatively solid fighter back in the day. I mean, he kind of fought the who's who of the 155-pound division before it came to be what we know it is today. I mean, he fought guys like Mac Danzig, Dennis Seaver, Cole Miller, Sam Stout, Jim Miller. I mean, he really fought everybody that was around back then. So we haven't seen him for 5 freaking years, and we don't have any idea what he's been up to. He's kind of a shut-in. He doesn't have any kind of social media. It's been real hard to track him down on anything. Luis Pena, on the flip side of things, Violent Bob Ross is 25 years old, 6-1, dropped a disappointing split decision to Michael Trezano, and then had a disappointing decision win over Steven Peterson in his last fight out. He just has not been as impressive as we would like to see him be in the UFC. The problem with this fight is I don't think we can necessarily fade him here because we have no clue what Matt Wiman's been up to. As far as I know, he's got a beer gut right now. So I would love to roll in here and tell you that I'm all over Matt Wiman, but I can't be. Luis Pena is a massive, massive favorite, like over minus 300 favorite right now. And I want to tell you to take Matt Wiman. I really, really do. Because at this point, I'm not high on Luis Pena. But Matt Wiman is 35 years old, and the prime years of an MMA fighter's career is kind of that 29 to 32, 33 kind of range. So he's going to be just barely over that hill. Now, granted, if he had some nagging injuries, if he's been training this whole time, that 5 years off may have done him good, but we don't know that that's what he's been doing for that 5 years. Pena may have been disappointing. Pena may not be everything I want him to be, but he is moving up a weight class here. This fight is happening in the lightweight division at 155. He was killing himself to get down to 145, so having a slightly easier weight cut, having an extra 10 pounds on that giant frame of his is probably going to do him some good. That'll give him a little bit more of an edge. And Matt Wiman, actually, he had a decently well-rounded game back in the day. I would expect him to come out here with a wrestling-heavy plan. Now, I personally may be sprinkling Matt Wiman wins by decision, because over at 5 times, that's 521. Plus 521 on Wiman to win by decision. And that's kind of the only way this fight goes. Pena hasn't been finishing UFC caliber people. If Wiman is in some way compromised, then maybe Pena finishes him. But I think this thing goes all 3 rounds. And I think with Matt Wiman's wrestling base, he can get in on those tall, lanky legs of Pena. And Pena does not mind working from his back. He might accept that bottom position. And if he does, Wiman might be able to rain down some shots. I think Wiman by 3-round decision is not a bad play, but it's not something that I can be confident enough to give out as a pick, as an official play for the podcast. So just know I will be sprinkling that 5-1 line because I think that's the only way he gets it done. Now, I will be watching closely at the weigh-ins, at the pre-fight interviews, those kinds of things. That's gonna tell us a lot. That's gonna tell us exactly what we need to know, because Wiman's finally gonna be getting some media attention. And when he answers some of those questions, keep an eye out on my Twitter at DieHardMMAPod, because maybe we end up playing that. If I see what I need to see, if he comes in shape, if he tells me that he's just been taking some time to heal up and he's been training hard for the last 4 of those 5 years, I probably ride with Handsome. So let's just kind of sit tight on that one. Let's see how this plays out. That's going to be very interesting. That's old school versus new school, and it's a middle of the road type of UFC name that Pena is going to be facing. So maybe he's up for that challenge, but it might also be a bit too much for him because Wiman's got some serious UFC experience. Moving right along, we go back to the women's strawweight division where Ashley Yoder takes on Siri Kondo. Ashley Yoder is 6'4" and 0. Siri Kondo is 6'2" and 0. And this is another one where I'm going to tell you straight up, we are avoiding this fight. Ashley Yoder is almost a 500 fighter. She's 6-4, which is not a good record. Now, she's fought Justine Kish, Angela Hill, Mackenzie Dern. I mean, these are decent UFC level names at this point. She got a split decision win over Amanda Bobby Cooper, and she is just barely hanging on to her job in the UFC. I honestly think the UFC might be trying to give Siri Kondo a bit of a boost here by kind of lowballing her, a girl that is not necessarily UFC caliber. Siri Kondo is 1-2 in the UFC, and she lost her most recent match to Xiaonan Yan. The one we bet on last time. She dropped a unanimous decision to her, and that was actually a really good fight. I'm very curious why they put the two of them together, because you get these two Asian women that are in a market that you want to be in, and rather than having them do what they're doing now by lowballing them opponents, they throw them into a fight with each other, where I don't know, one of them goes up and one of them goes down. I don't understand that thought process. I feel like that was kind of bad matchmaking. At any rate, she wins her UFC debut. She gets TKO'd by Paolo Bellatano and then she loses to Yan by decision. So I think they're giving her Ashley Yoder to try and give her that bit of a leg up on her career. I mean, this is one of those ones where it might be a loser leaves town match. Yoder is 1-3, and Kondo is 1-2. So loser may be walking home after this one here, but I think they're a little higher on Kondo, and I actually think that Kondo is the better fighter. This is another striker versus grappler kind of match where Yoder just has nothing to offer on the feet, and Kondo really struggles on the ground. So Yoder, as bad as she may be, might be able to take Kondo down and grind her out for this match. If it stays on the feet for the full 3 rounds, I expect Kondo to win by decision. So that's my breakdown. I'm not touching it. I'm fully avoiding this fight. Now we move to men's featherweight, where Dan Dynamite Dan Dynamite is taking on Kevin the Angel of Death Aguilar, and I like this fight. This is maybe my sleeper fight for the card, where we can just really get into this one. Dan Dynamite is 11-2, whereas Kevin Aguilar is 17-1. This is a hype train kind of fight. Well, not necessarily hype train. These guys aren't really hype trains. That's the wrong term. This is a contenders type of fight. This is where they've got these 2 young up-and-comers that are ready to crack into that next level at the UFC, and only one of them gets to. The other one's going to have to take a small step back. Now, Dan Dynamite Ige has only lost in the UFC to Julio Arce via decision. And his only loss before that came in his 3rd pro fight way back in 2015 via split. So he very, very easily, well, not easily. Anyway, he could have only had the 1 loss on his record. And Julio Arce, there's no shame in dropping a decision to Julio Arce. Kevin Aguilar has been nothing but impressive, and he's coming off of the Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. He won a unanimous decision against Rick Glenn, and then another one over Enrique Barzola for his first 2 UFC fights. So Dan is coming by way of Contender Series himself just a little bit before. He gets off the Contender Series with a phenomenal rear naked choke win, drops the decision to Julio Arce, wins, finishes another UFC fight. He wins by KO over Mike Santiago, and then he submits Dan Henry. He got a decision win over Jordan Griffin there, so Dan is going to be the one with a bit more experience here, and he trains out of Extreme Couture. We've got Kevin Aguilar coming out of Longview MMA, which that's not nearly as big of a gym as Extreme Couture. That doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot, but we know Extreme Couture. We know what they do. We know their coaches. We know the teammates. That's an established, legitimate gym. And I think that the line is off on this one. This is one where I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with it, because I think that Dan should be a slight favorite. I think shit, I'm going to stop calling him that. Dan should be a slight favorite in this spot, but he's not. He's a slight underdog in this spot. Kevin Aguilar is currently sitting as a slight favorite. I mean, he's right around minus 150, minus 140, something like that. The comeback on Dan should be about plus 110 to plus 120. And I really think that Dan should be a slight favorite, but we are going to pass because, once again, it's just too close. It's just too close. If Dan should be a favorite, if he should be a slight favorite. So we're not getting a ton of value on him at plus 110, plus 120. And Kevin Aguilar is no joke. So both of these guys are well-rounded. Both of these guys are finishers. Both of these guys know how to grind. I mean, this fight really could go either way. This is going to be a whoever implements their game plan first, whoever's will breaks first type of fight. It may be scrambly. It may be back and forth. It could be going to a split decision. Now, granted, if it goes to a split decision, you're going to want the dog in that kind of a spot, but it's too close for me to trust either of these guys to put the bet on. Lean to Dan Dynamite Ige. No official pick. Pass. And now we move on to the main event. We are in the middleweight division where Kevin Holland faces Alessio Di Chirico. Kevin Holland is 14-4-0, and this guy is just something else. He is just blessed. I mean, physical specimen. He is tall, he is long, he's strong, he's explosive. I mean, he's really got everything you're looking for. I hate when people always compare someone to John Jones, but that's kind of what he looks like here. He's got that reach, he's got that long, thin, muscular type of body. Alessio Di Chirico is more of a compact muscular type, which, I mean, pros and cons to both of them. You can use either one to your advantage, but Kevin could be so good, but he has a very low ring IQ. He won on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series in impressive fashion, and then he gets thrown into the UFC against Thiago Santos, and holy crap, who debuts in the UFC against Thiago freaking Santos? I thought Thiago was going to crush his face. I really did. He did a good job of surviving in that fight, but he did a lot of scrambling, a lot of rolling around. He gets out of that fight alive. He wins everybody's respect, right? We move on to John Phillips. He submits John Phillips in the third round. And again, he just has this thing where he puts himself in bad positions. He doesn't always make the best choices. He fights Gerald Meerschaert next, and he barely squeaks by. He wins a split decision against Gerald Meerschaert. Gerald Meerschaert gassed out at the end of round 2, and Kevin Holland just wanted to keep grappling with him. I couldn't understand the thought process here. I know he's confident in his submission game. He's got a legitimate submission threat. So I think he kept thinking, I'm going to catch this guy. Especially when Meerschaert gasses, I think he thinks I'm going to catch this guy. I'll bet you if he made Meerschaert stand with him, he could have KO'd him in round 3, but instead he chose to grapple, and it's not a good look. Alessio Di Chirico on the flip side of things is 12-2, and I think he's being severely underestimated here. He steps in for his UFC debut in 2016, and he drops a decision to Bojan Velkovic. Dang those Russians. I can't say those stupid names. So he drops a decision to this guy, and that's not great, right? Okay, no big deal. He bounces back with a win over Gareth McClellan, and that's not, again, it's not a fantastic win. Gareth is struggling in the UFC himself. I don't know if he's going to get another fight, so it's not a great win. And then he gets submitted by Eric Spicely. We know about Eric Spicely. Eric Spicely got dropped out of the UFC. This is his one of the few wins that he was able to put together against a decent level of competition. But Eric Spicely is a legit submission threat. He's insanely skilled when it comes to his submission game. So I give a little bit of a grain of salt on that one. Now, then he really gets rolling. All right. Then Di Chirico really gets rolling. He KOs Alawali Bengbose, and I'm actually a fan of Bengbose. He's had a real tough run in the UFC. And then he moves on and he wins a split decision over Marquez. So Marquez is a good fighter. Marquez is another one of these guys coming off the Contender Series that won a phenomenal first UFC debut, and then he drops a fight to Alessio Di Chirico. So I think that's more of a correct level of competition for Di Chirico. That was back in July of 2018. I think Alessio Di Chirico is going to be improved in this spot. He has taken an entire year off. I haven't seen any reports about him being injured. I haven't seen him, any reports about him having struggles in the gym, in life. I think he's a young fighter. He's 29 years old, and he took a year off to improve. And I really love when young up-and-coming fighters do this. I expect him to be better when he comes back. I think we're going to see Di Chirico 2.0. Kevin Holland, on the other hand, has not taken a break since he got into the UFC. Holy cow. The dude fought 5 times in 2018. He already fought once in 2019 as well, just back in March. He is not taking time to improve. Now, granted, if you're the kind of athlete that he is, maybe he's improving during all of this time. Maybe he's improving between these fights in these 3 and 4 month spans. It's possible for young fighters to do that. He is 26 years old. However, it's not as likely as when a guy takes a whole year off to really improve on their skill set. So I think the X factor as far as improvements go is on Alessio Di Chirico. Alessio Di Chirico has very, very good control in his grappling game. He's got a solid, well-rounded game for this level, and he has a control-based ground game, which is the exact opposite of Kevin Holland, who likes to really scramble. Alessio Di Chirico has good accuracy numbers in his striking. He's a little bit more traditional in his striking approach, whereas Kevin Holland is wild and crazy, and he doesn't have a massive accuracy rate because he's throwing all of these crazy type things in the moment. He really feels like he wants to be a John Jones. So it's kind of control versus chaos in this type of a situation. Kevin Holland is the type of fighter who I believe is ripe for shitting the bed. He's gonna do this stuff until it doesn't work anymore. He's gonna run into that fighter who's able to avoid the things that he is doing and then do just enough to get a win in. And I think that might be Alessio Di Chirico. Di Chirico is going to keep it tight. He's going to keep his hands up. He's going to plod forward. He's going to use angles. He's going to box. And then when it suits him, he'll go for a takedown or he'll defend a takedown. When it hits the mat, he's not going to crazy scramble. If Kevin Holland tries to crazy scramble, Sheriko's going to lock it down and look for a safe pass to advance his position. I just think that this is going to be a chess match, and if Holland can create chaos, he can win. If Sheriko can keep it a chess match, then I think that he wins. And it's a fight that I'm super intrigued in. I'm really interested in watching this one. The biggest thing that I love about this fight, however, is the betting line, because I don't think that Kevin Holland should be as big of a favorite as he is. 62% of the money has come in on Alessio Di Chirico, and I agree with it. The people that hit him at the opener, high fives all around to those guys. He opened up as a plus 225 favorite, and I think there's still value on him at plus 185. I think maybe he should be around a plus 125, plus 135 dog. There is value. Alessio Di Chirico is rightfully the dog here. Holland, because of his physical attributes, I do believe, and his submission game, I do believe he is the favorite rightfully in this spot, but I think it's a lot closer than this line is making it, and I think he's going to make some dumb choices, and he might accept the bottom, where Chirico might be able to get on top of him, land some ground and pound, because he thinks he's going to lock up that submission. Whether or not he can or does, he's going to think he can, and that'll allow Chirico to score. That'll allow Chirico to keep this fight close, and if it's a close fight, I want plus 185. Lock it up. There's our dog. Plus 185, Alessio Di Chirico. Now we're getting to the good stuff. Women's flyweight Andrea KGB Lee is taking on Montana De La Rosa. KGB is the other UFC lady that I've got a crush on. JoJo's my girl, and Andrea KGB Lee is my girl. She is one of those women who you're terrified that she will kill you, but she's just so dang cute. She wears that cowboy hat. She's this little crazy thing. It's awesome. I love it. Anyway, so she is 10-2-0. She's got a decent number of finishes on her record. She's got 2 KO TKOs, 4 submissions. Again, that's kind of against lower level competition. You're not going to expect to see that necessarily going forward. Montana De La Rosa is a younger fighter, so she will also be improving in this spot. She's 24 years old, 10-4-0. Both of them are relatively new to the UFC. Montana De La Rosa is 3-0 in the UFC with all 3 by submission. However, I do not think the level of competition that she has faced within the UFC really is UFC caliber. Look at the names on here: Christina Marks, Rachel Ostovich, Nadia Kasim. I mean, maybe Nadia. Nadia's probably okay to dip her toe here in the UFC, but the other two, I don't necessarily think so. Andrea KGB Lee, on the other hand, she fought Ashley Evans Smith in her last fight, and she picked her apart over a full 5 rounds. And we've seen Evan Smith in the UFC for a long time, facing some of the her well-known women's names in the UFC. So she's got a real staple on her record. She's got a real name on her record, and she beat her bell to bell. And the other thing is, the biggest thing for Andrea KGB Lee for me is the difference between her first UFC fight and her second UFC fight. She fought Veronica Macedo, and she won that fight by unanimous 3-round decision as well. Now, while Veronica Macedo may not be UFC caliber, she did what she had to do. Andrea Lee did what she had to do in that fight. But then in the Ashley Evans Smith fight, she really showed up. She showed some massively improved striking skills. I think that Andrea KGB Lee is improving at a drastic rate right now. The hop between her first fight and her second fight is really the thing that opened up my eyes to her, and I am very much on her in this spot. The problem is, once again, I hate the line. Andrea KGB Lee is a minus 205 favorite. She opened up around minus 200, and the line hasn't moved a whole ton. I mean, she's bumped up to minus 225 over at 5 dimes, but I think that's about right. Montana De La Rosa may show up improved and surprise us because, again, she's a 24-year-old fighter. They can rapidly improve at that point. But the only thing she's really got going for her is a submission game. Andrea Lee, I will expect to have worked on her takedown defense by now, and she is miles ahead of Montana De La Rosa on the feet. So it's a striker versus grappler match, and I do not think that Montana De La Rosa has the type of grappling pedigree that it's going to take to hold Andrea KGB Lee down for a full 3 rounds and get that decision. I don't think that she is going to be able to lock that submission up once it does get to the ground. So if she gets it to the ground, they scramble around for a little bit. Andrea KGB Lee is fully capable of getting herself back up to the feet. And because of that, I think it's going to be standing more than grappling. And I see Andrea KGB winning this. We are going to parlay Andrea KGB Lee. Again, we don't like some of these lines, so what we're going to do is we're going to take some of these favorites that are notably too big of favorites, and we are going to parlay them with another too big of a favorite, so we're only risking 1 unit instead of risking 4.5 to 5 units, and we're going to try and get some even money in these situations. Rolling right along, we head to the welterweight division where my guy Brian Barberena is taking on Randy Brown. This fight is one that I am super excited for. Brian Bam Bam Barberena is always must-see TV. This guy gets in there, and he has a chin like none other. He pushes the pace, he's out for blood, and he will take 5 shots to land 1, and when he lands that 1, you crumple. He's just a fun fighter to watch. I love this guy. He's severely underrated almost always until about now, actually. And Randy Rude Boy Brown is one of those guys that just does not have great ring IQ. Randy Brown, he's another physically gifted type of fighter. He's 28 years old and he just cannot seem to put it together. He seems to be a consistent bed shitter. And I say that in the kindest way possible. So, Brian Barberena, holy cow. So this guy's been in the UFC for a while right now. He was brought in to lose to Sage Northcutt. That's really when everybody was like, oh man, this guy, what a joke. And he wrecks Sage Northcutt. He came through as like a plus 300 underdog in that spot. Holy cow. Nobody really saw that coming. He takes Warley Alves to a decision, which that's impressive in itself. Then he gets thrown to Colby freaking Covington. He survives a 3-round war with Colby Covington, and he was able to, really survive is, I don't want to say survive because that seems like he was getting killed. It was the takedowns that were killing him. It's not like he was getting murdered by Colby. He had a good showing in that fight. He comes back from that loss and he KOs Joe Proctor in the first. He does drop a decision to Leon Edwards. So he goes 3 rounds with Colby Covington, Leon Edwards, and freaking Vicente Luque. Those are 3. So Vicente Luque is a top prospect. Let's be clear about that. Leon Edwards is about to fight Rafael Dos Anjos, and in my opinion, should be knocking on the door for a title shot. Leon Edwards is no joke, and he is extremely well-rounded. Colby Covington is the interim title holder at 170 pounds, and he should be fighting for the belt next. So the only guys that Barberena have lost to is really the elite of the division and exceptionally solid or well-rounded fighters. Colby Covington, extremely good wrestler. Vicente Luque, Leon Edwards, both very well-rounded. And he lost to 2 of them by decision. He didn't even give up a finish. Now, Vicente Luque did crush him in the 3rd round of their fight, but he was the only one who was able to pull that off. And he's basically blasted everybody else that they've put him in there with. So if you are not top tier, Barberena kills you. Randy Brown comes in here, and this is the guy who squeaked out a decision over Mickey Gall. And Mickey Gall, as we know, is not the fighter that we thought that he would be. He also gave up very recently that brutal KO from the bottom of Nico Price, which your boy was on Price for that one, and wow, was that fun. He tied his legs up, Nico Price was laying on his back, and Brown was kind of in almost like a heel hook type position, and Nico Price hits him with this crazy hammer fist from the bottom that just shuts the lights off. I mean, one of those things where you expect him to get 1 or 2 in, and Randy Brown just kind of shrug it off and then pass guard or something like that. No, he clips him perfectly with this real awkward hammer fist, and Brown just collapses on top of him. Shut out cold. Now, that was about a year ago. So I was just talking about how young fighters, they take this amount of time off, they come back, they're improved, they're better. He took that time off because of a bad KO. This is not a back to the drawing board, let's figure it out, try and, correct your style type of thing. I mean, I'm sure they did that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not stupid. I know they're taking this young fighter and they're taking a look at his skill set and they're working on everything. But the majority reason that he took that amount of time off was to recover from a really, really bad KO. Brian Bam Bam Barberena is that guy that if you don't shut his lights off, he is coming for you bell to bell. He has concussive power in both hands and he does not stop walking forward. Randy Brown's going to enjoy a height and a reach advantage in this spot, but I do think Barberena is going to be able to force his way inside that height and reach advantage, and he'll be able to touch on that chin. Whether he roughs him up for a full 3 rounds, takes him down and puts him on his back and pounds him out, I'm not sure. I do think Barberena gets this thing done inside the distance. Barberena is a little higher of a favorite than I would like him to be, but you know my strategy here. We are going to piece together a couple of these big favorites and hold our nose and hope we can hang on for these parlays here. So Brian Barberena sitting right around minus 270 over at 5 times, and that's what we're going to be looking at. Stay tuned for the episode recap. At the end of this thing, we will line up all the bets and tell you exactly how we're going to play this thing. That brings us to the co-main event of the evening, where John Lineker is taking on Rob Font. And this is another interesting fight. I know, I always say that. Clint said it's an interesting fight. Everybody do a shot. John Hands of Stone Lineker is 31-9. The dude is only 29 years old. He is a complete monster. He has legendary power, and his style, everyone knows exactly what he's going to do, but you cannot stop it. He's a little tank. He's going to wade forward, and he uses these strong, powerful hooks to kind of corral you where he wants you. And as soon as he gets you in a spot where you can't quite get away, he unloads. Overhand rights, uppercuts, wide winging hooks, and he's just got this crazy power that people do not like to feel. Now, he lost a decision to TJ freaking Dillashaw, TJ EPO Dillashaw back in 2016. We have to put a question mark next to that. We believe TJ Dillashaw is the best, bantamweight we've probably ever seen. However, with him coming out being on EPO, that makes a massive difference in that kind of a fight. So he was able to do things to Lineker that really nobody else could do. So I understand TJ Dillashaw has some crazy skills, and I've bet on him a lot in my history. But this is where we have to question those things. Sorry about that. Punch the microphone there. So since TJ comes in here and he does what nobody else can do to John Lineker, he takes him down, he kind of throws him around, he he wins a unanimous decision in that fight. You've got to wonder, how much was that EPO doing for him? How much of a boost did he get from that EPO to get that done? Maybe he doesn't otherwise get that done because he really was the little engine that could. He just kept on coming, and it didn't seem like anything that Lineker did really fazed him, which that's what EPO does. So don't know if we can really credit that entire loss there. Besides that, if it wasn't for that, Lineker has 4 losses in the UFC since 2012. He was on a 6-fight win streak, which included a win over Rob Font before he ran into Dillashaw. So if we draw a line through that Dillashaw, we give him another 2 wins, decision over Marlon Chito Vera, who I am high on, and Brian Kelleher, who he won by 3rd round KO. He did very recently drop a split decision to Corey Sandhagen, which we cashed on. I've got a lot of history of this card where we had some pretty successful bets here. But that was via split decision, and I'll be honest, going back and recapping that fight for, tape study, getting ready for this one, we might have gotten away with one. I don't know if Corey Sandhagen won that fight. That was really, really close. And being on the young up-and-comer who's got the height and reach advantage and the dog money, I feel like we made the right play there, but I don't know if he actually won that fight. We might have gotten away with one. So that brings us to Rob Font. While Lineker has been crushing skulls and taking people out, Rob Font has been kind of struggling since he lost to John Lineker. He went 2 wins, 1 loss, 1 win, 1 loss, 1 win. And it hasn't been against bad competition. I mean, he's got a unanimous decision win over Sergio Pettis. That's nothing to sniff at. He lost to Rafael Assunção. Okay, everybody loses to Rafael Assunção. In round 1, he gave up a sub to Pedro Munoz, which we know the kind of beast Pedro Munoz is. We just saw him face Aljamain Sterling, and we were very, very close to pulling the trigger on a bet on him because he is a beast. So Rob Font has not been facing a bad level of competition, but it does seem like every single time he takes a step up into that top 5 ballpark, he drops it. He just doesn't have the ability to hang with that group of fighters. John Lineker is the younger of the two here, and do not forget this is a rematch. I always say, when fighters rematch, favor the younger fighter. They're the ones that are more than likely going to be evolving, they're going to be more than likely learning their lessons, and they'll be ready to come in here and really take what happened in the first fight and do something with it in the rematch. I don't think that Rob Font will have reinvented his game by now. John Lineker is definitely not going to reinvent his game, but he will tweak it. His game is one of those ones where he's just going to tweak it ever so slightly, as he continues on in the UFC, because it just works. It keeps working. He almost beat the champion TJ Dillashaw with this game. It's not broken. Don't fix it. Rob Font has terrific boxing. He is going to have a slight height and reach advantage, but the explosiveness of John Lineker being able to close the gap between himself and his opponent because of that reach advantage, he almost nullifies it. And Rob Font does not like getting hit. We've seen that, especially in the previous Lineker fight, which wasn't so long ago that we should necessarily disregard it. Lineker makes people shell up, man. I'm really high on Lineker. I think this is lined appropriately. I think he wins this fight. Most of the money has come in on Rob Font, and for that, I have to say thank you to the people betting out there, because we get our fighter at a much more desirable price. 55% of the money has come in on Rob Font, and that has driven Lineker down from a minus 270 opener to about minus 200 over at 5 Dimes, minus 210, minus 205 at Bet Online. That's more where this needs to be. I think that's about right, and I like it. The main freaking event pits Renato Moicano Carneiro against Chan Sung Jun, the Korean Zombie. What a fight. Chan Sung Jun, the Korean Zombie, is never in a boring fight. The Zombie is one of my favorite fighters. He should be one of everybody's favorite fighters to watch because he is never in a dull fight. He brings the heat every single time, and he is willing to go out on his shield when things don't go his way. Moicano is this young up-and-coming stunner, and he has amazing stats. He controls fights in every aspect. He's got incredible significant striking numbers and accuracy percentages. Head on over, check out my guy MMA by the Numbers. I know I'm being vague when I say that because I don't have them memorized, but that's where I get all of that information. I listen to MMA by the Numbers before I do my podcast, before I do my picks every single time, because that information really is invaluable. And no, we're not partners. I don't even know the guy in real life, but I shout him out regularly because his information is just so dang good. Now, Moicano is 13-2-0, and the Korean Zombie is 14-5-0. Zombie's only about 32 years old. Moicano is 30, so both of them are relatively in their career primes at this point. Chan Sung Jun may have lost some of his prime. He did take a 4 or so year sabbatical because he had to do his Korean military mandated time in his home country. So we lost about 4 years of what could have been amazing UFC fights, and that was a real shame for us as UFC fighters. But, props to the guy. He went ahead and he served his country, and that's what you're supposed to do. So thank you for that. Even though I'm not Korean, I'm still going to thank him for it. So we have got Moicano sitting at about minus 200. The line hasn't moved a whole lot. He opened at a minus 210. About 60% of the money has come in on Chan Sung Jun. And this is another spot where we are going to thank the people for driving the favorite line down for us. Now, to break this fight down, the Korean Zombie basically has to get this thing done inside the distance. Renato Moicano is one of those guys that, like I said at the top of this thing, he will control the fight from start to finish. He utilizes leg kicks very well. He's got a very solid striking defense, and he is very long and rangy. He can hit you where you can't get him, and he's got really great footwork to circle out and move around, make sure he doesn't get hurt too badly. Now, he did get starched against Jose Aldo. We have to remember that, but he took, it's not as long as I would like him to take off for a KO, but I rewatched that one, and it's not as bad as it looks. The referee kind of stepped in and saved him. He was rocked, but he wasn't out. He didn't get completely disconnected from his senses. He wasn't face down on the mat or anything like that. So with that fight happening back in February, he's been off for about 4 months. He's a young guy. I think that's probably okay. It would be different, like I said, if he had been face down on the mat. Speaking of face down on the mat, Yair Rodriguez flatlined the Korean Zombie. That was fight of the freaking year. Back in November, when the Korean Zombie came back against Yair Rodriguez, oh my God. Rewatching that fight really just, I forgot how good it was. I knew that's one of those ones that goes on the short list of favorite fights of all time, but you forget just how good it is until you actually go back and watch it. Oh my gosh, they went to war. They beat the shit out of each other for a full 5 rounds. The gloves, they did the little clapping thing for 10 seconds left in the round. They stood in the middle. They both put their hands up because they knew that they had just an incredible fight, put on an incredible show. And then they pounded fists one more time and said, we're going to go at it until the bell rings for that final 10 seconds. And Yair Rodriguez threw the craziest up elbow I have ever seen when the Zombie just overreached a little bit, or not a little bit, he really extended hard on it, but whatever, he was going for it, and Yair threw this crazy up elbow that crushed his jaw and he collapsed. It was nuts, and he didn't move. He was out for so long, and I can understand why. That was a devastating shot and something we've never seen before. KO of the year candidate for Yair Rodriguez. Holy cow. But the amount of damage that the Korean Zombie suffered in that fight, that's something you've really got to take into consideration here. That was only in November. So we are looking at about 6 months or so from that. I don't know that that's enough time. I mean, Yair Rodriguez, he's not even got a fight at this point in time, and he's not the one that suffered the KO. I know he's got some haggling issues with the UFC. He's got some complaints about how much he's being paid and all that. So maybe that's what's going on there. But the winner of the fight is not back yet. The loser of the fight, who got brutally starched, is the one who's coming back at this point. So I just don't think that's a long enough layoff. I worry about the Korean Zombie's chin in this fight because I think this fight is going to be very, very similar. Now, granted, Moicano is not the type of dynamic striker that Yair Rodriguez is, but he is going to control the pace of the fight more, and he's going to pick Chan Sung Jung apart. The only way that Chan Sung Jung wins this fight is by forcing a brawl. Now, that's what he does. That's his whole style, and that actually is what Renato struggles with. He got clipped pretty badly by Cub Swanson. When Cub finally realized he saw the writing on the wall and knew he wasn't going to win the fight, he just went for broke, and he started landing big shots on Moicano, and that really seemed to bother him. Well, then he fights Jose Aldo, and he gets into a spot where Aldo decides, okay, let's throw the gauntlet down, let's do this, and as soon as he did that, he overwhelmed Moicano, and he was really having a hard time handling it. Chan Sung Jung is going to do the same exact thing. I do think that Moicano has grown in his wins and losses recently, and one of the things I want to go back for is Calvin Kattar. We know just how devastating Calvin Kattar is from his last performance. I think it was last week. I'm sorry, not last week, the week before, where we bet on him against Ricardo Lamas. Boy, did he come through in that fight. Again, that's another winner for us on the record here. He really went to war with Moicano, and Moicano controlled that fight from start to finish. He's completely capable of doing it. That's the thing. He is completely capable of doing it. And Chan Sung Jung, he may get frustrated. He might try to force the brawl. As long as Renato is able to get out of there and not get clipped, on the chin and really just give in to the brawl, which I don't see him doing. I see him being more technical. I see him landing some leg kicks and circling out. I think he controls this thing from start to finish. I think Canaro can win this thing by decision. And if Zombie's chin is compromised, then maybe Renato can get him out of there. He's a significant striking machine. He doesn't have that one punch KO power, but he does have the volume significant strikes. Now, this is a bit of a stretch. It's kind of like Max Holloway. Obviously, Max Holloway has way more volume, but that's the kind of striking that he has. He will volume significant strike you into your grave. I think the line is about appropriate. Chan Sung Jung has a puncher's chance. He very much has a puncher's chance, but I think Renato is going to be a strong enough wrestler to keep it standing, so I don't think we're going to have to worry too much about a submission threat. And when it's standing, Renato is going to have the control and the striking, and unless he gives into a brawl or Chan Sung Jung clips him just right, I'm pretty sure Moicano wins this thing. Now, I fully intended to break down the Bellator 223 card at this point in the podcast, but we have already gone over an hour on the podcast, and as much as I love talking MMA, and I could talk MMA basically all day, my wife actually does want to see me and spend a little bit of time with me, so I'm going to edit this podcast down to get it ready to get loaded up here, and you'll just have to keep an eye on my Twitter for Bellator 223. Once those lines come out, once we have a little better idea of what we want to do with Bellator, we will more than likely have plays to go on that one. But at this point, I'm not going to do a full breakdown because I could spend another 30 or 45 minutes getting Bellator queued up here for you on the podcast. And they only have lines for the 3 main fights out. James Gallagher is fighting again, and he's a massive favorite, which he shouldn't be. Paul Daly is a massive favorite, which he should be. And Gegard Mousasi is a massive favorite, which he should be. So, I mean, it's one of those things, you know. They're trying to set James Gallagher up to win, so they're giving him more than likely what's considered a squash match. And then the other 2 are big favorites, and they're rightfully big favorites. So, I don't know. Keep an eye out on my Twitter. I'll more than likely have plays, but I'm not going to take the time to break it down here because just like the last Bellator event, 222, if there's a spot that I like, kind of like the Aaron Pico fight where I was intending to fade him almost no matter what the line was, I don't have a fight that I'm that interested in on this particular card, but I also only have 3 lines, and all of them are crazy wide, so there's really not an opportunity for value on them. Let's recap them picks. We are going to kick our night off with Jairzinho Rozenstruik via KO, or inside the distance at -142. We are going to take a stab on Alessio Di Chirico as a big, juicy dog, +185. We are going to do a 3-teamer parlay. That is right, you heard me correct. We are going to take Win at -280, Andrea KGB Lee at -225, and Brian Barberena at -270. That gives us a payout of +168. This way we risk only 1 unit, and if one of them craps the bet, it only hurts us for 1 unit instead of covering all 3 for a nice big score. Then we are going to parlay John Lineker at -210 and Moicano in the main event for a +120 payout, and we are going to be putting 2 units on the main event parlay. You heard that right. Lineker and Moicano, 2 units, +120. That'll do it. Them's the plays for UFC Greenville. Thank you all so much for the love and support. Give me a like, give me a share, subscribe, tell your family, tell your friends. Let's roll, diehards. Let's roll.